Hi class, Dr. Fenwick here. This is the best practice video for the motivation module. Um, I thought this module went well. Your posts and responses were pretty high quality. Now let me start with best practices for this week. Um, this is Janelle in group 4. Nice job, Janelle. You can see how she's clearly marked out her response to her interview question. Same way, if you follow through her challenge, it's everything is clearly marked, highlighted important term. They got her exam question on the ABCs of motivation. So this was well done. So nice job, Janelle. I'd also, best practices, I've got Jacob here from group 1. Same thing. Notice little bit different format, but it's really easy to follow. Stands out. He did use STAR in his behavioral response. He's used diet in response to the challenge. So nice job, Jacob. There's in terms of content, there was a little bit of confusion around reinforcement theory and classical conditioning. So let me just say a couple things about this. Number one, the main difference is reinforcement theory has 3 terms. There's the antecedent, there's the behavior, and there's the consequence of what happens after the behavior. That's where they get ABC. And what happens after the behavior makes a difference because it either strengthens the behavior, in other words, it makes it more likely to happen, or it weakens the behavior, makes it less likely to happen. And the environment presents the conditions. Now, in classical conditioning, there's only 2 terms. So if we use the same language, it'd be antecedents and behavior, but normally we say stimulus and response because what happens after the response does not matter because it's learning by association. Once a person has learned by association, it happens, the behavior happens automatically. For example, when I hear a particular song on the radio, it makes me think of the person I was with when I first heard that song. So that's automatic. It just comes in. It doesn't matter what happens afterwards. So that's the big difference between the two. The other thing tricky about this theory and reinforcement theory, in psychology, the terms positive and negative are defined differently than the dictionary. What they actually mean, positive means presenting something, and negative means taking something away or avoiding it. And so anytime something's presented, it's positive, whether it was desired or undesired. If it's taken away or avoided, it's negative, whether it was desired or undesired. Now, what happens to the behavior if the behavior strengthens, in other words, if it's more likely, then it's reinforcement. And if it's less likely, it's punishment. So, for example, spanking a child because they did something bad, that is positive punishment. You're presenting something, spanking, to weaken the behavior. So the child's less likely to do it again. The most common example of negative punishment is taking away their playtime. We call that timeout. So child has bad behavior, they're placed in timeout, they're forced to sit in a chair away from other children. Then when their behavior straightens up, you can give back what you took away. So you give the playtime back. That's why psychologists recommend negative punishment over positive punishment, because with positive punishment, there tends to be resentment that builds up, where there's less of that in negative punishment. So I did want to kind of cover that. The other thing I wanted to highlight, let's see if I can drag this over here. The job characteristics model. Number 1, this is the model that was the basis for Oil Hat Joe's story in week 1. So Um, what's unique about this theory is it is a theory of extrinsic motivation, where you notice all the needs theories are intrinsic. So what this is basically saying, and you come over here to these core job dimensions, this theory is saying some jobs are terrible jobs. In other words, the nature of the job itself creates the motivation. And it's based upon these dimensions. Skill variety, in other words, how much of my talent does it require? Task identity, can I relate to what I'm doing? For example, when I was young, I worked in a factory on a assembly line putting screws into taillights, and I had no idea what they were. After I did that for a couple of months, I discovered that the taillights I was making went on Cadillacs. So then my task identity went up. I felt like I was building Cadillacs instead of just putting screws into lights. Task significance, how important does a person feel that their work is? Now, these three in the formula that is provided, they are added together and divided by 3. And it's called experience meaningfulness. Autonomy is how much responsibility, freedom to move around, do things your way. And notice that in terms of motivation holds as much weight as the 3 of these together. And then probably, maybe the most important is feedback. Knowledge of your actual work results. In other words, do you know if you're doing a good job or not? Because if you do not, that's very demotivating. Can you imagine going to a bowling alley, throwing a ball down the alley, and there's a curtain in front of the pins and you hear a crash, but you can't see what the result was? How long would you stay there and throw the ball down the alley? Probably not very long. I remember once I was coaching T-ball, and all the parents thought, hey, it wouldn't be great, just let the kids play, don't worry about winners and losers. So that's what we did. We didn't keep score or anything. And at the end of the game, you could ask any kid on either team what the score was, they'd tell you. They were sitting on the bench keeping score. They wanted to know the results of the game. That was their motivation, was part of their fun. So those are the psychological states that are related. And these are the job outcomes. Now, in this theory, Hackman and Oldham actually quantified this with a formula. So you could say, for example, you could go into an organization where motivation seems to be a problem, and you could analyze the nature of the job using this formula and surveying the workers. And then based upon their scores to these 5 areas, you can make changes in the job to improve the motivation. And because there are a lot of jobs that are terrible jobs. They're just not motivating at all. And so a lot of times that's the problem. It's not the person. And in Oil Hat Joe, that was one of the problems there as well, is that that job was a bad job. So anyway, I wanted to clear those up. We've started the new module this week, so hopefully you're enjoying the reading on that. And nice job on the motivation module, and I'll see you in the discussions. Thanks.